When a mall manager cancels a black family's Christmas party, citing vague reasons, he unknowingly sets off a chain of events that reveal their surprising power. A story of resilience, unity, and transformation unfolds in this heartfelt holiday tale. Write in the comment where you're watching this video from. Martin Sheffield, the mall manager of Pinewood Mall, prided himself on his ability to keep things running smoothly. The holiday season was his ultimate test, a high-stakes balancing act between keeping the tenants happy, managing the chaos of the season's crowds, and ensuring the mall remained a festive haven for holiday shoppers. To Martin, order was everything, and disruption was the enemy. On an otherwise ordinary December morning, his inbox pinged with an email notification. Adjusting his glasses, he clicked it open. The subject line read, "Event request, Parker Family Christmas Party." Martin skimmed the email quickly, scanning for red flags. The Parker family, according to their email, wanted to host a large Christmas party in the mall's community center. The request detailed plans for decorations, catering, and live music, alongside a note that local charities would be involved. At first glance, it seemed benign enough, but as Martin read further, unease crept in. 100 guests? In the middle of the holiday rush? He muttered, shaking his head. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his neatly combed hair. To him, it sounded like a logistical nightmare. What if the noise drove away shoppers? What if security issues arose? His mind spiraled into worst-case scenarios. And then there was something he didn't like about the tone of the request. It seemed demanding, as if they assumed their party was more important than the mall's carefully orchestrated holiday plans. "Not on my watch," he said aloud, reaching for his keyboard. Typing quickly, Martin crafted a response. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Parker, thank you for your interest in hosting an event at Pinewood Mall's community center. Unfortunately, we are unable to accommodate your request due to logistical constraints and high demand for the space during this time. We appreciate your understanding. Sincerely, Martin Sheffield, mall manager." Satisfied with his firm but professional reply, he hit send. Martin took a sip of his coffee, imagining the Parkers receiving the email and moving on without much fuss. After all, these kinds of cancellations happened all the time, or so he thought. By the afternoon, Claire, his assistant, knocked on the door of his office. "Mr. Sheffield," she said hesitantly, clutching a clipboard. Martin looked up from his paperwork. "Yes, the Parker family called. They're asking for clarification about their event cancellation." Martin frowned. "I already explained in the email logistical constraints." "I know," Claire said, shifting uncomfortably, "but they seemed persistent. They mentioned their event is for charity and that they've been planning it for months." Martin sighed, irritation creeping into his voice. "Claire, we're running a business here. It's not my job to accommodate every charity event that comes our way. Tell them the decision is final." Claire hesitated, then nodded, retreating from the office. For Martin, the matter was closed, but over the next few days, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Parkers were not the type to let things go easily. Angela Parker sat at her kitchen table, staring at the email on her laptop screen. The polite but curt rejection from the mall's management felt like a punch to the gut. Jerome Parker, her husband, stood beside her, his arms crossed. "They didn't even give us a real reason," he said, his voice calm but tinged with frustration. Angela sighed. "We've hosted this party every year in different venues. It's never been a problem before. Why now?" Jerome leaned over to read the email again. "Logistical constraints? That's a cop-out. They just don't want us there. Do you think it's because?" Angela trailed off, her voice quiet. Jerome nodded grimly. "Could be. Or it could just be that this Martin Sheffield guy is on a power trip. Either way, we're not letting this stop us." Angela glanced over at their twins, Micah and Maya, who were sitting on the couch, talking excitedly about the party. For them, this event wasn't just a family tradition. It was a celebration of community, love, and giving back. Micah looked up. "Mom, are we still having the party?" Angela hesitated before answering. "We're figuring it out, sweetie. Don't worry. Jerome patted her shoulder. I'll handle this. The next morning, Jerome made his way to Pinewood Mall. Dressed in a tailored suit, he looked every bit the successful businessman he was. Jerome had built his career in real estate, investing in underappreciated properties and transforming them into thriving assets. Few people in the city knew just how extensive his portfolio was, and Jerome preferred it that way. When he arrived at the mall office, Claire greeted him nervously. "Mr. Parker," she said, offering a strained smile. "I'm sorry about the inconvenience, but as I mentioned on the phone, I'd like to speak with Mr. Sheffield," Jerome said firmly. Claire hesitated, then nodded. "Let me see if he's available." A few minutes later, Martin appeared in the doorway, his expression tight. "Mr. Parker," he said, extending a hand. "I understand you wanted to discuss the event cancellation." Jerome shook his hand, his grip firm. "That's correct. My family and I have been planning this event for months. We've already secured caterers, musicians, and donations for local charities. I'd like to understand why it's suddenly impossible to host it here." Martin gestured for Jerome to sit down. "As I mentioned in my email, it's simply a matter of logistics. The holiday season is our busiest time, and the community center is in high demand." Jerome raised an eyebrow. "Is it booked during that time?" "Well, no," Martin admitted, "but we need to keep it open for mall-related activities." "Such as?" Jerome asked. Martin hesitated, clearly caught off guard by Jerome's directness. "Mr. Parker, I don't think you understand how these things work. We have to prioritize events that align with the mall's goals." Jerome's eyes narrowed. "And a charity event that benefits the community doesn't align with your goals?" Martin cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, but the decision is final." Jerome stood, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Sheffield. I'll be in touch." As he walked out, Jerome couldn't help but smile to himself. Martin had no idea who he was dealing with. Jerome Parker stepped into his home later that evening with the same calm composure he'd maintained throughout the day. But Angela, who had known him long enough to read him like a book, caught the flicker of irritation behind his steady eyes as he loosened his tie. "Well?" Angela asked, setting aside her mug of tea. "They're standing by the cancellation," Jerome replied, placing his briefcase on the kitchen counter. "Sheffield is digging his heels in, claims it's a logistical issue, but he's bluffing." Angela sighed. "So what's the real issue? You think he has a problem with us?" Jerome leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Possibly. Or maybe he just thinks we're another family that can't push back. Either way, he's going to learn we're not the ones to underestimate." Micah and Maya peeked into the kitchen, their curiosity piqued by the conversation. "Dad, does this mean the party's off?" Micah asked, his voice tinged with disappointment. Jerome shook his head. "No, son, it's not off. It just means we might have to make some adjustments. Don't worry, we'll figure it out." Angela nodded. "We always do." Micah and Maya exchanged relieved smiles and wandered back to the living room. Once they were out of earshot, Angela turned back to Jerome. "So what's the plan?" Jerome grinned. "We remind Sheffield who he's dealing with. The Parkers were no ordinary family. Jerome and Angela had built their lives on the principles of perseverance, community, and giving back. After years of hard work, Jerome's real estate investments had paid off in ways that even he hadn't fully anticipated. Among his many properties was Pinewood Mall, a quiet acquisition he had made during a downturn in the market. Jerome had chosen not to publicize his ownership of the mall, preferring to keep a low profile. He believed in empowering the managers he hired to run the properties, trusting them to maintain high standards without micromanagement. Pinewood Mall was one of his more hands-off ventures until now. Angela folded her arms. "I thought you didn't want anyone to know we own the mall." Jerome nodded. "I didn't, but this situation calls for a reminder. I'll make a few calls in the morning and see how Sheffield reacts when he realizes the party he canceled belongs to the people who sign his paycheck." Angela smirked. "He's not going to see this coming." The next day, Jerome placed a call to the Pinewood Mall corporate office. After a brief conversation with the regional director, the message was clear. Martin Sheffield needed to be reminded of his place. Martin received the call that afternoon, and the effect was immediate. Sitting in his office, he listened as the regional director explained the situation. "Martin," the director said, her voice firm, "the Parker family owns Pinewood Mall. Jerome Parker is the principal investor in the entire property." Martin's stomach dropped. "They own the mall?" "That's correct. And they're deeply involved in the community. The Parker family's contributions have been integral to the mall's success. Canceling their event without a valid reason is not just unprofessional. It's unacceptable." I wasn't aware of their involvement," Martin stammered. "Well, now you are. Fix it. Immediately." The call ended, leaving Martin staring at his phone, his heart pounding. He had made a grave mistake, and the consequences were only beginning to unfold. At home, Jerome updated Angela on the day's developments. "He knows now," Jerome said, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. "Let's see if he has the guts to admit his mistake." Angela laughed softly. "You're enjoying this a little too much. Can you blame me? It's not every day you get to turn the tables on someone who thinks they're untouchable." As the Parkers prepared to move forward with their Christmas party plans, Martin scrambled to salvage his reputation. He drafted an apology email, nervously typing and deleting sentences until he settled on something that struck the right balance of humility and professionalism. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Parker, I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience caused by the earlier cancellation of your event. I was unaware of the significance of your family's contributions to Pinewood Mall and the broader community. Please know that we are fully committed to accommodating your Christmas party as originally planned. Thank you for your understanding, and I hope we can work together to make this event a success. Sincerely, Martin Sheffield." Angela read the email later that evening, raising an eyebrow. "Looks like someone's had a change of heart." Jerome chuckled. Amazing how quickly people come around when they realize the stakes. But Angela wasn't entirely satisfied. "You're going to let him off the hook that easily?" "Not quite," Jerome said, his tone serious. "An apology is a start, but he needs to do more than send an email. He's going to have to face us, and the community, and explain himself." Angela nodded, her expression resolute. "Good. He should understand the impact of his actions. Not just on us, but on everyone who looks up to what this party represents." Jerome agreed. "It's time to make sure Pinewood Mall stands for what we believe in: equality, community, and respect." Despite Martin Sheffield's hasty apology, Jerome and Angela Parker weren't quick to forget the slight. For them, the issue went beyond the inconvenience of rescheduling a Christmas party. It was about standing up for their values and ensuring no one else in their community experienced similar discrimination. That evening, the Parker household buzzed with activity. Angela sat at the dining table, spreading out notes and sketches of how the community center would be decorated. Maya and Micah sat nearby, bouncing ideas back and forth about games and activities for the kids. "Can we have a gingerbread house contest this year?" Maya asked excitedly. "And karaoke," Micah added. "Nothing says Christmas like a bad version of Jingle Bell Rock." Angela chuckled. "You two should be on the planning committee. You've got more ideas than anyone." Jerome walked into the room, a cup of coffee in hand. He took a seat across from Angela, studying the sketches she had drawn up. "It's coming together," he said. "But we need to make sure this year is even bigger than before. After what happened, I want this party to make a statement. Not just for us, but for the whole community." Angela nodded. "Agreed. We're not just throwing a party. We're showing everyone what unity looks like." Jerome leaned back in his chair. "The mall staff will have to cooperate, of course. Martin said he'd make things right, but I want to ensure he follows through." The next morning, Jerome arrived at Pinewood Mall for a meeting with Martin. As he entered the office, he noticed Claire sitting at her desk, looking more anxious than usual. "Mr. Parker," she said, standing quickly. "Mr. Sheffield is expecting you. Please go right in." Jerome nodded politely and stepped into the office. Martin stood from behind his desk, his nervous smile betraying his discomfort. "Mr. Parker, thank you for coming," Martin began, extending a hand. Jerome shook it briefly and sat down. "Let's get to it. You said you'd ensure the party goes forward as planned. What does that look like?" Martin cleared his throat. "We've reopened your reservation for the community center. My team will assist with setting up the decorations, managing security, and coordinating with your caterers." Jerome raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like you're covering the basics. What about addressing the root issue? Why the event was canceled in the first place?" Martin shifted uncomfortably. "It was a misunderstanding. I didn't have all the facts, and I made a poor decision." Jerome leaned forward, his tone firm. "This isn't just about facts, Martin. It's about how you see people like my family, and the assumptions you make about them. If this was a misunderstanding, it's one you need to learn from. Because the next time, it might not be me sitting across from you. It might be someone who doesn't have the resources or the platform to fight back." Martin's face flushed. "You're absolutely right. I've been reflecting on this, and I want to do better. Not just for you, but for everyone who comes to this mall." Jerome studied him for a moment before nodding. "Good. Then let's make this party a success." With the event officially back on, Angela and Jerome threw themselves into preparations. They coordinated with caterers, reached out to local musicians, and worked with volunteers to set up donation drives for food and toys. The Parker family's Christmas party wasn't just about celebrating. It was about giving back. In the weeks leading up to the event, word spread throughout the community. Families from all walks of life signed up to attend, and local businesses donated supplies and prizes for raffles. Pinewood Mall, which had initially been the center of controversy, began to feel like a hub of holiday spirit. Even Micah and Maya got involved, recruiting their friends to help set up the decorations. "This place is going to look amazing," Maya said as she hung snowflake ornaments from the ceiling. Micah nodded. "Everyone's going to love it, especially when they see the gingerbread houses we're making." Angela smiled as she watched her children work. Their excitement was contagious, and it reminded her why they worked so hard to make this party special. As the big day approached, Angela and Jerome visited the community center one last time to oversee the final preparations. The space had been transformed into a winter wonderland, complete with twinkling lights, garlands, and a massive Christmas tree at the center of the room. "This is perfect," Angela said, taking it all in. Jerome nodded. "It's everything we imagined. Now let's make sure the event runs smoothly." But just as they were about to leave, Claire approached them, looking nervous. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker," she said, clutching a clipboard. "There's something you should know." Angela's heart sank. "What is it?" Claire hesitated before answering. "Some of the mall staff have been resistant to helping with the event. They think it's too much work, and they're worried it might disrupt shoppers." Jerome's jaw tightened. "Have they said this to Martin?" "They have," Claire admitted. "But he told them to cooperate. Still, I thought you should be aware." Angela exchanged a look with Jerome. "Thanks for letting us know, Claire. We'll handle it." As they left the mall, Angela couldn't shake the feeling that not everyone was on board with their plans. But she also knew one thing for certain: the Parker family wasn't backing down. Jerome Parker had built his career on understanding leverage. In the world of real estate, leverage wasn't just about money. It was about influence, timing, and making sure people understood your position without needing to boast about it. For years, Jerome had stayed in the background as the owner of Pinewood Mall, allowing the management team to run the day-to-day operations. But now, with their Christmas party hanging in the balance, he realized it was time to step forward. That evening, as he and Angela reviewed the final guest list and event itinerary, Jerome decided to take matters into his own hands. "I'm going to the mall early tomorrow," he said, setting his tablet on the counter. Angela looked up. "To do what?" "To remind Martin and his team who they're working for," Jerome replied. "There's too much at stake for us to let this slide. If some of his staff think they can sabotage the event, they're in for a surprise." Angela raised an eyebrow. "You're not planning to start a war, are you?" Jerome smirked. No, just a little power play. Sometimes people need to see the bigger picture. The next morning, Jerome arrived at Pinewood Mall before it opened. The corridors were quiet, the holiday decorations gleaming under the soft light of early morning. As he walked toward the management office, he noticed a few mall employees whispering and casting nervous glances his way. Good, he thought. Words getting around. When he entered the office, Martin Sheffield was seated at his desk, his face buried in a stack of papers. He looked up, startled, when Jerome stepped inside. "Mr. Parker," Martin said, standing quickly. "I wasn't expecting you this early." Jerome closed the door behind him and took a seat across from Martin. "I thought it was time we had a conversation," Jerome said, his tone calm but firm. "I've been hearing some concerning things about your team's attitude toward our event." Martin swallowed hard. "I can assure you, Mr. Parker, we're doing everything we can to support the event. There are just a few staff members who are resistant, but I'm handling it." Jerome leaned forward, fixing Martin with a steady gaze. "Let me be clear. This event is not just another party. It's a celebration for our community. People who shop here, work here, and make this mall what it is. If your team can't see that, then perhaps they're not the right people for the job." Martin nodded quickly. "I understand. I'll make sure everyone is on board." Jerome sat back, his expression softening slightly. "Good, because I'm not here to micromanage. I've stayed in the background for a reason. I believe in giving people the freedom to do their jobs. But when that trust is broken, I step in. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," Martin said, his face pale. "Great," Jerome said, standing. "Now let's make this event a success. I'll be here to oversee things if needed." As Jerome left the office, he felt a sense of satisfaction. He didn't enjoy pulling rank, but sometimes it was necessary. Angela arrived at the mall later that morning with Maya and Micah in tow. The three of them headed straight for the community center, where volunteers were busy setting up tables, arranging decorations, and preparing the stage for the evening's performances. "Wow," Maya said, her eyes widening as she took in the sight. "It's even better than I imagined." Micah grinned. "It's going to be epic." Angela smiled but remained focused. "Let's keep things moving. We've got a lot to do before tonight." As they worked, a group of mall employees arrived to assist. Among them was Claire, who immediately began directing the setup. "Thanks for coming, Claire," Angela said. "Of course," Claire replied. "We want this to be perfect." But Angela couldn't help noticing a few employees standing off to the side, whispering among themselves and casting skeptical looks at the preparations. She walked over to them, her expression friendly but firm. "Hi there," she said. "Is everything okay?" One of the employees, a young man with a name tag that read Brandon, shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just a lot of work for one event, you know?" Angela tilted her head. "It is a lot of work, but this isn't just any event. It's a chance to bring the community together and make a difference for families who need it. That's worth a little extra effort, don't you think?" Brandon hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I guess you're right." "Good," Angela said with a smile. "Now let's get to it. We've got a party to throw." As the day progressed, the community center transformed into a magical holiday wonderland. Volunteers worked tirelessly, hanging garlands, setting up tables for the food drive, and arranging the donated toys under the Christmas tree. By the afternoon, the Parkers were exhausted but exhilarated. "This is going to be incredible," Angela said, stepping back to admire the decorations. Jerome joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "It's already incredible. And tonight, when the lights go up and the music starts, it'll be unforgettable." Maya and Micah ran up to them, their faces glowing with excitement. "Everything's ready, Mom," Maya said. "Can we help with the gingerbread table now?" Angela laughed. "Go ahead. Just don't eat all the candy before the contest starts." As the sun began to set, the final touches were put in place. The Parkers stood back and took in the sight of the community center, transformed into a beacon of holiday cheer. Jerome looked at Angela, a smile spreading across his face. This is more than a party. It's a statement. And tonight, everyone's going to know what the Parker family stands for. Angela nodded, her heart swelling with pride. Let's make it a night to remember. The day of the Christmas party dawned with a flurry of activity. Volunteers bustled around Pinewood Mall's community center, ensuring every detail was in place. The air buzzed with excitement, but a lingering tension hung in the background. For Jerome and Angela Parker, the party wasn't just a festive gathering. It was a chance to address the underlying challenges that had surfaced in the past few weeks. Jerome had spent the morning reviewing last-minute logistics when he received a call from Claire. Her voice was polite but carried a hint of urgency. "Mr. Parker, Martin would like to meet with you before tonight's event," she said. Jerome's brow furrowed. "Did he say why?" "Not exactly," Claire replied, "but I think it's important." Jerome agreed to the meeting, though he suspected it wasn't just a casual check-in. He informed Angela of the development, and she gave him a knowing look. "He's probably trying to save face," she said. "Let's find out," Jerome replied, grabbing his coat. When Jerome arrived at the office, Martin was already seated behind his desk, his hands clasped tightly on the surface. His usual air of self-assuredness was notably absent, replaced by an anxious energy that filled the room. "Mr. Parker," Martin said, standing as Jerome entered. "Thank you for coming." Jerome nodded curtly, taking a seat. "What's on your mind?" Martin hesitated, glancing briefly at the papers on his desk before meeting Jerome's gaze. "I wanted to discuss tonight's event. First, I want to reiterate my apologies for the way this situation was handled initially. It was unprofessional, and I take full responsibility." Jerome listened silently, his expression unreadable. Martin continued, his voice faltering slightly. "That said, there have been some concerns raised by a few staff members about the scale of the event. They're worried about the impact on mall operations during peak holiday shopping hours." Jerome raised an eyebrow. "Let me get this straight. After everything we've been through, you're still questioning whether this event should happen?" "No," Martin said quickly, his face reddening. "That's not what I mean. The event will go forward, as planned. I just wanted to make sure we're aligned on how to handle any potential disruptions." Jerome leaned forward, his tone measured but firm. "Martin, let me tell you what this event is about. It's about community. It's about giving back to people who need it most. And it's about showing this mall, our mall, that it's a place where everyone is welcome. If your team can't see the value in that, then maybe they're not the right team for Pinewood Mall." Martin swallowed hard, his composure slipping. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Parker. I assure you, I'm addressing these concerns with my staff. The event will go off without a hitch." Jerome stood, his presence towering over the seated manager. "Good, because tonight isn't just about my family. It's about the hundreds of people who are coming here to celebrate, to connect, and to be reminded of what the holiday season truly means. I suggest you keep that in mind." Martin nodded, his face pale. "Understood." As Jerome left the office, he felt a sense of satisfaction. Martin Sheffield had been humbled, but Jerome knew the real work was just beginning. The evening's event needed to be more than just a party. It needed to be a testament to the values that he and Angela had worked so hard to uphold. Angela Parker was overseeing the final preparations when Jerome returned. The space looked stunning, with twinkling lights casting a warm glow over the room. Tables were adorned with festive centerpieces, and a towering Christmas tree stood proudly in the center, surrounded by neatly wrapped presents donated by local businesses. "How'd it go?" Angela asked as Jerome approached. "He's on board," Jerome replied. "Or at least, he knows better than to push back now." Angela smiled. "Good, because tonight is going to be amazing." Maya and Micah ran up to them, their excitement palpable. "Mom, Dad, the first guests are starting to arrive," Maya said. "Let's go greet them," Angela said, taking Jerome's hand. As families began streaming into the community center, the atmosphere grew lively and joyous. Children ran toward the activity tables, where volunteers were leading crafts and games. Adults mingled, chatting over cups of steaming cider and hot chocolate. A local choir took the stage, filling the room with the sound of holiday carols. Jerome and Angela moved through the crowd, greeting guests and ensuring everything was running smoothly. Everywhere they went, they were met with gratitude and praise. "This is incredible," one woman said, holding her daughter's hand. "Thank you so much for doing this." "It's our pleasure," Angela replied warmly. Not everyone shared the festive spirit, however. Near the back of the room, Jerome spotted a few mall employees standing together, their expressions less than enthusiastic. Among them was Brandon, who had expressed skepticism about the event earlier. Jerome approached them, his smile polite but firm. "Evening, folks," he said. "Enjoying the party?" Brandon hesitated before replying. "Yeah, it's nice. Just a lot of work, you know?" Jerome's gaze didn't waver. "A lot of work, yes, but look around. Do you see the joy on these kids' faces? Do you hear the laughter? That's what this is about. And I hope you'll take pride in being part of something that brings this kind of happiness to our community." Brandon nodded slowly, his expression softening. "I guess I didn't think about it that way. Sometimes," Jerome said, his tone gentle but pointed, "it's not about the work, it's about the impact." As Jerome walked away, he noticed Brandon and the others joining the festivities, their attitudes shifting as they saw the joy unfolding around them. By the time the evening was in full swing, the community center was alive with laughter, music, and a palpable sense of togetherness. For the Parkers, it was everything they had hoped for and more. Jerome and Angela watched the crowd as the event unfolded. Children lined up to take pictures with Santa, parents exchanged warm smiles, and volunteers handed out gifts to families in need. The scene was a perfect blend of holiday cheer and the spirit of giving back. The community center sparkled with the glow of twinkling lights and the energy of a united crowd. It was exactly what the Parkers had envisioned. As Jerome stepped away to check on the donation tables, Angela stayed behind to oversee the gift distribution. She noticed a group of teenagers helping with the toy giveaway. Among them were Maya and Micah, both beaming as they handed presents to younger children. Angela's heart swelled with pride as she watched her kids embrace the values she and Jerome had worked so hard to instill. Jerome, meanwhile, was navigating through the bustling crowd. At the donation tables, he was greeted by several community leaders who had come to show their support. Among them was Pastor Green, a longtime family friend. "Jerome, this is extraordinary," the pastor said, shaking Jerome's hand. "Your family has brought so much light to this community." Jerome smiled. "We couldn't have done it without everyone's help. This isn't just about us. It's about all of us coming together." As the conversation continued, Jerome's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen and saw a message from Claire. "Martin would like to see you in the office. It's important." Jerome excused himself and made his way toward the mall offices. The festive sounds of the party faded as he entered the quieter corridors of the mall's back office area. When he reached Martin's office, the door was slightly ajar. He knocked once and stepped inside. Martin was seated at his desk, his face tense. He stood quickly when Jerome entered. "Mr. Parker, thank you for coming." Jerome closed the door behind him. "What's this about, Martin?" "We're in the middle of the event." Martin gestured for him to sit. "I know, and it's going very well, but I needed to speak with you privately." Jerome remained standing, crossing his arms. "I'm listening." Martin hesitated, then let out a long sigh. "I wanted to thank you for giving me a chance to make this right. I know I mishandled things in the beginning, and I've been thinking about why. I realized it's not just about logistics or policy, it's about my own blind spots." Jerome's expression softened slightly, but he didn't interrupt. "I made assumptions about your family, your event, and even about what this mall stands for," Martin continued. "And I was wrong. Watching the joy in that community center tonight, it's made me realize how much I have to learn about what it means to lead with integrity." Jerome finally sat down, his gaze steady. "Martin, recognizing your mistakes is a start. But leadership isn't about words. It's about actions. If you want to do better, show it." Not just to me or my family, but to everyone who walks through those doors. Martin nodded, his expression earnest. I will. And I want you to know that I'm committed to making this mall a place where everyone feels welcome. Jerome leaned back slightly, considering his words. Good, because this event isn't just a one-time thing. It's the beginning of a stronger connection between this mall and the community it serves. I expect you to uphold that. You have my word, Martin said firmly. Jerome stood and extended his hand. Martin took it, and for the first time, Jerome felt a genuine sense of resolution. As Jerome left the office, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He returned to the community center just in time to see Angela leading a sing-along with the children. The room was alive with laughter and music, a testament to the power of community and perseverance. Tonight, the Parker family had made their statement, and it was one that no one at Pinewood Mall would soon forget. As Jerome returned to the community center, the sight of families laughing, children unwrapping gifts, and the sheer joy radiating from every corner struck him deeply. This was the vision he and Angela had always wanted to bring to life. A celebration that went beyond their family, touching the lives of everyone around them. He spotted Angela speaking with a group of volunteers and made his way toward her. Everything sorted out? She asked, giving him a knowing look as he approached. Martin had something to say, Jerome replied. He's starting to understand. Angela raised an eyebrow. Starting? Jerome smirked. Let's see how he handles the next steps. Words are easy. Actions take effort. Meanwhile, Martin Sheffield lingered in the hallway outside the community center, his thoughts racing. The weight of his earlier decisions pressed heavily on him as he peered through the glass doors at the scene unfolding inside. Families were gathered around tables. The Christmas tree sparkled with ornaments, and volunteers moved effortlessly between stations, ensuring everyone felt welcome. It was a stark contrast to the sterile efficiency he usually associated with the mall. For Martin, the realization that the Parker family owned Pinewood Mall had been shocking enough. But seeing firsthand how their event transformed the space into a haven of joy and generosity was humbling. He thought back to his initial reaction when the Parkers had submitted their request. His immediate doubts, the hasty cancellation, and the assumptions he had made without even speaking to them. He sighed and adjusted his tie before stepping inside. If he was going to repair his reputation and his conscience, he needed to face the Parkers and the community directly. Martin walked up to Jerome, who was speaking with a group of local business owners. When Jerome noticed him, the conversation quieted, and all eyes turned to Martin. He cleared his throat, his nerves evident. Mr. Parker, Martin began, his voice steady but low. I just wanted to thank you for allowing me to be part of this event. It's truly remarkable. Jerome raised an eyebrow. This wasn't just about allowing you to be part of it, Martin. This is your community, too. But it's up to you to decide how you fit into it. Martin nodded, glancing at the group around them. I owe you all an apology, he said, his voice louder now, addressing not just Jerome but everyone in earshot. When this event was first proposed, I made the wrong decision. I let my own biases and concerns cloud my judgment. Seeing what this event has done for our community tonight, I realize how wrong I was. I'm deeply sorry for the harm my actions may have caused. The group exchanged glances, surprised by the candid admission. Angela, who had been listening nearby, stepped forward. Apologies are a start, she said. But like Jerome said earlier, actions speak louder. What are you going to do moving forward to make sure something like this doesn't happen again? Martin met her gaze, determination replacing his earlier nervousness. I'll start by ensuring that our mall policies reflect the values we want to stand for: community, inclusivity, and support for events like this. And I'll work with local leaders to identify more ways we can use the mall as a resource for the people it serves. Angela studied him for a moment, then nodded. Good. Let's hold you to that. The crowd began to warm up to Martin after his heartfelt speech, and several people offered words of encouragement. For the first time that evening, Martin felt a sense of belonging, not as the mall manager, but as part of the community. As the night wore on, Martin joined in the festivities, helping distribute gifts and chatting with attendees. Slowly but surely, his rigid demeanor softened. He laughed with children as they showed off their gingerbread creations, took pictures with families under the Christmas tree, and even participated in a karaoke rendition of Jingle Bells. For Jerome and Angela, seeing Martin's transformation was a reminder of the power of unity and second chances. While they knew it would take time for him to fully earn the trust of the community, tonight was a step in the right direction. By the end of the evening, the community center was filled with exhausted but happy guests. Volunteers began tidying up, and families lingered to say their goodbyes. Angela and Jerome stood near the entrance, shaking hands and exchanging hugs with everyone who passed. Martin approached them as the crowd thinned out. "Thank you again, both of you," he said. "Not just for tonight, but for everything you've taught me about leadership and community. I won't forget it." Jerome extended his hand. "You've got a long way to go, Martin, but if you're serious about change, you'll have our support." Martin shook Jerome's hand, gratitude shining in his eyes. "I am." As Martin walked away, Angela leaned against Jerome, letting out a contented sigh. "I think tonight was more than a party." Jerome wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "It was a new beginning, for the community, for Martin, and for us." Angela smiled. "That's what Christmas is all about, isn't it?" Jerome nodded. "It is." The Parkers stood together, watching the last of the guests leave. Their Christmas party had become more than they could have ever imagined. A celebration of togetherness, a lesson in resilience, and a reminder that change was always possible when people came together. The echoes of laughter and caroling still rang in Jerome's ears as the final families trickled out of the community center. Angela stood by his side, her arm looped through his, while Maya and Micah helped the volunteers clean up. The event had been a resounding success, but as the night began to wind down, Jerome found himself reflecting on everything that had led to this moment. Angela nudged him gently. "You've been quiet. Everything okay?" Jerome smiled, though his expression carried a touch of weariness. "Just thinking about how far we've come, not just tonight but as a family. This party wasn't just about celebrating Christmas. It was about reclaiming our space in the community." Angela nodded, understanding his unspoken thoughts. "It's more than a party. It's a statement that we belong, that we matter." Jerome's gaze shifted across the room. Martin Sheffield stood near the Christmas tree, speaking quietly with Claire. Jerome could see the relief in Martin's posture, the weight of the night's earlier tension lifting from his shoulders. For all the missteps Martin had made, tonight had forced him to confront his biases in a way that couldn't be ignored. Angela followed Jerome's line of sight and sighed. "Do you think he'll really change?" Jerome considered the question before replying. "People can change, but it takes effort." Tonight was a wake-up call for him. Whether he acts on it, that's up to him. Angela smiled. "Well, I think you handled him perfectly, and tonight, it was magical." "Because of you," Jerome said, his voice filled with warmth. "You kept everything running smoothly." "Teamwork," Angela replied, her smile widening. Meanwhile, Maya and Micah were busy folding tablecloths and gathering leftover decorations. Maya turned to her brother, grinning. "Can you believe how many kids showed up for the gingerbread contest?" Micah laughed. "Yeah. And did you see that little girl who decorated her house with all the candy? She ate more than she used." "She was adorable," Maya said. "This is the best Christmas party we've ever had." Hearing their children's laughter filled Angela with pride. "They're growing up so fast," she said softly to Jerome. "And they're learning so much about giving back." "That's because of you," Jerome replied. "You've taught them what it means to be part of something bigger." Angela leaned against him, letting the warmth of his words settle over her. As the volunteers began to wrap up, Martin approached Jerome and Angela. His earlier nervousness had given way to a cautious optimism. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker," Martin began, his voice measured but sincere, "I just wanted to thank you again for allowing this event to happen. It's opened my eyes to things I hadn't considered before." Angela tilted her head slightly. "It's not about us allowing it, Martin. It's about doing what's right for the community." Martin nodded. "I understand that now. Tonight was about more than just a party. It was a reminder of what this mall can represent. I'm committed to making Pinewood Mall a place that truly reflects the values we saw tonight. Jerome studied Martin for a moment, searching for any hint of insincerity. Finding none, he extended his hand. Actions will speak louder than words, but I'll take this as a good first step. Martin shook his hand firmly. You'll see, this isn't just talk. Angela chimed in. And remember, this isn't just about big gestures. It's about the little things, how you treat people, how you listen, how you lead. Change starts with those small decisions. Martin nodded. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you again. As Martin walked away, Angela turned to Jerome. You know, he's not the same person who canceled our reservation. No, he's not, Jerome agreed. But let's see if he keeps evolving. The remaining volunteers began stacking chairs and cleaning up the last of the decorations. Maya and Micah joined their parents, both looking energized despite the late hour. Can we do this every year? Maya asked, her eyes shining. Micah nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, this was amazing. We could make it bigger next time. Jerome laughed. Let's get through tonight first. But I'm glad you two enjoyed it. We didn't just enjoy it, Dad, Maya said. We learned a lot, like how much goes into planning something like this, and how important it is to stand up for what you believe in. Angela placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. That's a lesson I hope you carry with you forever. Jerome added, and remember, it's not just about standing up for yourself. It's about standing up for others, too. The family lingered in the community center for a while longer, savoring the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. The Christmas tree lights still twinkled, casting a soft glow over the now empty space. It was a moment of calm after weeks of preparation and tension, a moment that reminded them of what the season was truly about. As they locked up and headed to their car, Jerome felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Tonight wasn't just about proving a point or reclaiming their party. It was about creating something meaningful for the people they cared about. The mall, the community center, the entire night. It had been a vessel for something far greater. Love, unity, and the unyielding spirit of Christmas. Back at home, the family gathered around their own tree, its lights twinkling softly in the living room. Micah and Maya sprawled on the couch, still chatting about their favorite moments from the party. Angela sat beside Jerome, her hand resting in his. This was a Christmas to remember, she said quietly. Jerome nodded. It was, and it's just the beginning. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, the Parkers reflected on the journey that had brought them here. They had faced challenges, stood firm in their values, and ultimately created something that would leave a lasting impact. For the first time in weeks, Jerome felt a profound sense of peace. Angela leaned against him, her voice barely above a whisper. Merry Christmas, Jerome. He kissed the top of her head, his heart full. Merry Christmas, Angie. The lights on the tree flickered softly, filling the room with warmth and promise. It was a Christmas they would never forget, a celebration of love, resilience, and the true meaning of the season. The Christmas party at Pinewood Mall's community center had officially become the talk of the town. Families buzzed with excitement, and the vibrant energy of the celebration extended beyond the event itself, radiating through the community. For Jerome and Angela Parker, this night symbolized a culmination of effort, resilience, and love, but it also represented something bigger, a renewed sense of unity among everyone who attended. As the evening reached its peak, the community center was alive with activity. A group of children clustered around the craft tables, assembling ornaments and decorating cookies. On the far side of the room, Santa Claus posed for photos with excited kids while parents laughed and chatted. The aroma of warm cider and freshly baked treats filled the air, blending perfectly with the cheerful sounds of holiday music performed by a local choir. Jerome stood near the entrance, observing it all with a quiet sense of pride. Angela joined him, her hand lightly brushing his arm. Look at this, she said softly. All these people coming together. It's exactly what we hoped for. Jerome smiled. More than we hoped for. This isn't just a party. It's a reminder of what this community is capable of when we support one another. Angela looked around, her gaze landing on the donation tables where volunteers sorted through an overwhelming number of toys and food items. The generosity this year is unbelievable. We're going to be able to help so many families. Jerome nodded. That's the best part. Everyone who came tonight contributed something. It's not just about receiving, it's about giving. Nearby, Maya and Micah were hosting the gingerbread house competition. They had transformed it into a full-scale production, complete with festive music, colorful candies, and plenty of laughter. Maya, holding a microphone, addressed the crowd of participants. All right, everyone, time to present your gingerbread houses. Let's see what you've got. Micah, standing beside her, added, and remember, no eating the decorations until after we judge. Anyway, the crowd erupted in laughter, and a line of children eagerly displayed their creations. Angela beamed as she watched her kids lead the activity with confidence and enthusiasm. They're naturals, Jerome said, his voice filled with pride. I think they're learning more from this than we realized. Angela nodded. This experience is shaping them in ways they'll carry forever. The room quieted briefly as the local choir began another performance. Their harmonized voices filled the air with a moving rendition of "O Holy Night." Many guests paused to listen, their faces reflecting the deep emotions stirred by the music. Jerome and Angela stood hand in hand, absorbing the moment. As the song ended, applause filled the room, and a wave of warmth swept through the crowd. Jerome stepped forward, taking the microphone from the choir leader. He waited for the applause to settle before addressing the guests. Good evening, everyone, he began, his voice steady and warm. Angela and I want to thank you all for being here tonight. This event is special to us, not just because it's a celebration of Christmas, but because it's a celebration of community. He paused, scanning the room. When we started planning this party, our goal was to bring people together, to create a space where we could share joy, generosity, and connection. And looking around tonight, I see so much more than that. I see a community that truly cares for one another. Angela stepped forward, her voice equally heartfelt. We're overwhelmed by your generosity, the donations, the support, the love that's filled this room tonight. Every gift on that table, every item of food, every smile you've shared. It's all going to make a difference for someone who needs it. The crowd erupted into cheers, and Angela handed the microphone back to Jerome. We're proud to be part of this community, he said, and we can't wait to do this again next year. The applause was thunderous, and as Jerome and Angela stepped off the stage, they were greeted by countless guests who expressed their gratitude and admiration. The Parkers, however, felt the deepest gratitude of all, for the people who had shown up, for the lessons learned, and for the opportunity to create something meaningful. As the night progressed, even Martin Sheffield seemed to be swept up in the holiday spirit. He mingled with guests, helped distribute gifts, and even joined in a round of karaoke, much to the amusement of the crowd. His earlier awkwardness had given way to genuine engagement, and Jerome noticed the subtle shift in how the community responded to him. Angela caught Jerome watching Martin and nudged him. He's making an effort. Jerome nodded. He is, and it's a good start. Let's hope it lasts. The festivities carried on well into the evening, with guests savoring the final hours of the event. As the clock inched closer to closing time, the Parkers took a moment to step outside for some fresh air. The crisp night air was a sharp contrast to the warmth inside, and the stars above seemed brighter than usual. Angela wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck. This feels like a dream. Jerome slipped an arm around her shoulders. A dream we made real, and it's only the beginning. They stood in silence for a moment, savoring the quiet outside before heading back into the bustling community center. The party was winding down, but the impact of the evening would linger far beyond the event itself. Families would take home memories, children would remember the joy of the season, and the Parkers would carry the knowledge that they had truly made a difference. As they walked back inside, Maya and Micah ran up to them, their faces glowing with excitement. "Mom, Dad," Maya exclaimed, "you have to see the gingerbread houses. They're amazing." And the food drive table is overflowing, Micah added. We're going to help so many people. Jerome and Angela exchanged a smile, their hearts full. Lead the way, Jerome said, following his kids into the crowd. The night ended with a final song, sung by everyone in attendance. Voices of all ages joined together, creating a harmony that filled the room with love and unity. It was the perfect conclusion to a night that had been about more than just celebrating Christmas. It had been about building something greater than themselves. As the last guests departed and the volunteers began to clean up, Jerome and Angela took one final look at the transformed community center. It had been an unforgettable night, one that solidified their belief in the power of community and the importance of standing up for what matters. This Christmas party had become more than an event. It was a testament to resilience, love, and the magic that happens when people come together. For the Parkers, it was a night they would cherish forever, and one they would ensure lived on for years to come. The glow of the Christmas party lingered in the air as the community center emptied. Volunteers stacked chairs and packed away decorations, their laughter and chatter carrying a sense of fulfillment after a successful night. Jerome and Angela Parker remained at the center of it all, guiding the final steps and thanking everyone who had contributed. Martin Sheffield, the mall manager who had started as the night's most reluctant participant, stood to the side, watching the Parkers with a thoughtful expression. He approached them slowly, his usual confident stride tempered by humility. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "I just wanted to say thank you for tonight, for everything. You've shown me a side of this mall and this community that I'd forgotten existed." Jerome turned to face him, his gaze steady but not unkind. "Martin, this event was about more than us. It was about showing what's possible when people come together. The real question is, what happens now?" Angela added, "It's not enough to have one great night. This kind of unity, this generosity, it has to be part of how the mall operates every day." Martin nodded, his shoulders straightening. "You're absolutely right. I've already spoken with Claire and the rest of the staff. We're going to create a plan for more community-focused events. I want Pinewood Mall to be a place that reflects the values we saw tonight." Angela smiled, but her tone remained firm. "That's a good start. But it also means treating everyone who comes through those doors with respect and fairness, no matter who they are or what they look like." Martin's face reddened slightly, but he met her gaze. "I understand. I know I have a lot to learn, and I promise I'll do better." Jerome studied him for a moment, then extended his hand. "If you're serious, you'll have our support." Martin shook Jerome's hand firmly. "I am." As Martin walked away, Angela let out a soft sigh. "Do you think he'll follow through?" Jerome looked thoughtful. "I think he wants to. Whether he does or not depends on whether he's willing to put in the work." Angela nodded. "Well, we've done what we can. Now it's up to him." The cleanup continued, and the Parkers' twins, Maya and Micah, were busy helping organize the leftover donations. The food drive table, which had been overflowing during the party, now had neatly packed boxes ready for distribution to local shelters. The toy donation station was equally successful, with more than enough gifts to brighten the holidays for dozens of families. Maya ran up to her parents, holding a handmade card she had received from one of the younger attendees. "Mom, Dad, look at this. A little girl made this for me. She said it was the best Christmas she's ever had." Angela took the card, her eyes welling with tears as she read the child's heartfelt message. "This," she said softly, showing the card to Jerome, "this is why we do it." Jerome nodded, his heart full. It's moments like these that remind us what really matters. As the family gathered to admire the card, Claire approached, clipboard in hand but a relaxed smile on her face. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker, I just wanted to say thank you. This event was something else. I've been with the mall for years, and I've never seen anything like it." Angela smiled. "Thank you, Claire. Your support made a big difference." Claire hesitated, then said, "I think tonight taught all of us something about what's possible when we work together. I know Martin has a long way to go, but I think he's genuinely trying to change." "We hope so," Jerome said. This mall has the potential to be a cornerstone of the community. It just needs the right leadership. Claire nodded. And after tonight, I think it's on the right track. As the last of the volunteers left, and the community center began to settle into silence, the Parkers took one final walk through the space. The remnants of the night's magic still hung in the air, stray bits of glitter on the floor, the faint scent of pine from the Christmas tree, and the echoes of laughter that seemed to linger in the corners of the room. Are we really going to do this again next year? Maya asked as they loaded the car with the remaining supplies. Of course, Angela said, smiling. And the year after that, and the year after that. This is who we are. Micah grinned. Can we make it even bigger next time? Jerome laughed. Let's get through the rest of this year first. But I like the way you think. When the family arrived home, the night felt quieter than usual. They settled into the living room, the glow of their Christmas tree casting soft light across the room. Maya and Micah curled up on the couch, exhausted but happy. Angela leaned against Jerome, her head resting on his shoulder. This Christmas was different, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jerome kissed her temple. It was, but it was exactly what we needed. Angela smiled. And what the community needed, too. The family sat together in peaceful silence, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. They had faced challenges, stood up for their beliefs, and created something that would leave a lasting impact on everyone who had attended. The Christmas party had been more than a celebration. It had been a lesson in resilience, love, and the power of coming together. As the clock struck midnight, signaling the end of Christmas Day, Jerome looked around at his family, the warmth of the season filling the room. "Merry Christmas," he said softly. "Merry Christmas," Angela replied, her voice full of love. Micah and Maya, half asleep but smiling, echoed their parents' words. And as the lights on the tree twinkled, the Parker family felt the profound peace that came from knowing they had truly made a difference. The night had ended, but their legacy had just begun. For the Parkers, this Christmas would forever be remembered as the moment they reminded the world, and themselves, what the season was really about.